our lives. There are certain times we want to brush certain things under the carpet, or sometimes we can't actually identify and tell that this is what the problem is. But it's affecting a lot of marriages, it's affecting a lot of people's lives, and we think that it is normal. And this is none other than low libido. And today we bring down this topic to you. Good evening, Dr. Kasenene.
Good evening, Sophia.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you for accepting to come in today again as well for the show.
It's my pleasure, always happy to be here with you on the show.
Okay, now let's start with the major question. What is libido?
So libido is, in simple terms, the urge or the desire to have sex. It's really the innate part of our being that has that desire to, to have sex with your partner or with the opposite sex. So it's really basically around sexual desire and urge.
Okay. Now, when we talk about high libido, what is high libido?
So I think it's very hard to, to say for sure this is high or low libido. No, it is possible to say what is low libido, but libido is basically depends on each person. And as long as somebody is comfortable with the urge or the desire to have sex, that's what we call, I would say, is a normal libido.
Okay.
Now, there are circumstances where people will, maybe have an abnormally high urge to have sex. And sometimes people will even have sexual addictions around that. But the definition of normal libido is, I would say, is dependent from person to person. But there are times where somebody actually will notice that they actually have a low libido or a low desire to have sex, or the sex drive is actually low. So that's when we can say someone has a low libido, when they notice that their drive to have sex is low. And that's usually when you're in a sexual relationship and you start to realize that you no longer have interest in having sexual relations. That's when someone technically is having low libido.
Okay. And what are the causes of the low libido? Let's use a case study and scenario of maybe the kind of clients you see, because I know that the causes vary, male versus female. Our causes are different.
So yes, the causes of low libido between male and female vary, although there are some similarities. In my practice, I kind of see people who have more chronic, disease, lifestyle-related diseases, and most of the people actually who come in will always answer a question around sex drive. And I think it would be fair for me to say that maybe half of the people will actually, mention that they're having issues with the libido. I like to use an acronym of SODA for causes of low libido. Of course, SODA, I'm an advocate of healthy eating, but the S is really stress. So stress is the big one. Stress is actually one of the big drivers of low libido, and together with the S is sugar. So sugar and soda. So these are part of the causes. Then the O is obesity. The people who are overweight and obese usually are going to have issues with libido because the fat on their body will affect the way their normal hormones work. The D is diabetes. So many people who have diabetes, one of the things that will actually help them realize that they need to take action is when their libido actually goes low. We also have drugs. Drugs can be two forms. It can be prescription drugs, like high blood pressure medications, or depression medications, or even birth control pills. But also people who are using these recreational drugs sometimes will struggle. Then the A is alcohol. Alcohol is the other big one. So excessive consumption of alcohol can actually affect your libido. And then the other A is anxiety. So anxiety can take two forms. So because sex is sort of an emotional act that is also hormonal, if you're anxious about the act, sometimes it can actually affect your libido. But also anxiety generally, if people who are quite anxious will have issues with libido. So these tend to be the major causes for most people. But then there are also other things that can cause low libido, like your hormones. So if you have a hormonal issue, and this is where really men and women tend to also vary. So for the men, if you have a low testosterone level, testosterone is the male hormone, it can affect your libido. Most people, it's really not low testosterone, but as you grow older, that can be an issue.
Can happen, yeah.
The ladies, it tends to be hormone issues around the thyroid. So people who have a hypothyroidism, where your thyroid, which controls metabolism, is becoming sluggish, it can affect libido in women. The other hormones are adrenal. We talked about this last week,
yeah.
About the chronic fatigue. The adrenal glands produce cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Now, what is important for people to understand is that stress hormones and sex hormones are made from the same raw materials, cholesterol. Now, most people think cholesterol is bad, but in this case, it's actually beneficial. Now, when you have heightened levels of stress, your body steals all the raw materials that would go to the sex hormones and prioritizes them to the stress hormone.
Okay.
So now you have people having, low sex hormones, testosterone and others, because of an adrenal dysfunction. The last one, which is related to diabetes, is insulin. A lot of people will have insulin resistance, which causes diabetes, but will not have diabetes. And once you have insulin resistance, you will tend to have changes in your hormones that can actually suppress your libido. But maybe I can also bring in at this point that sometimes people have low libido, but sometimes people have erectile dysfunction. Now, these are similar but different. And maybe I can just explain the difference. So, a low libido is when you have a low desire
to have
sex, or low sex drive. Erectile dysfunction is where, even though you don't necessarily have a low libido, but you're not able to either obtain or sustain an erection. Now, with low libido, it tends to be more of the hormones, okay? But with erectile dysfunction, it tends to be the circulation, because the penis, and this is now for men, needs blood to flow into the penile tissue for you to be able to have an erection. Now, insulin resistance drives a process that converts sugar into fat and unhealthy cholesterols. And these also can affect the blood vessels in the penis, in the penile region, and can eventually lead to a situation where you're not able to have enough blood flow to the
penis.
So insulin resistance is another big thing. Now, how do you know you have insulin resistance? Is usually you're starting to gain weight easily, especially around the belly. You're starting to crave sugars. And if you miss meals, you start to feel like you're weak. But of course, you can test this. So generally, yes, these are the causes of low libido. I like the SODA acronym. Sometimes you can have chronic health conditions that can lead to a low libido. Chronic fatigue is one of them.
The cancers.
Cancers is one of them. But the big one that I find is people who have digestive health issues.
Okay.
Now, if someone has gas and bloating and heartburn and constipation, they tend to have inflammation in their gut. And this causes changes in the gut that eventually trigger our immune system to wake up, and it then leads to hormonal changes that can cause low libido. So if you have gas and bloating, and you also have fatigue and maybe headaches and poor sleep and low libido, usually the problem is starting in your digestive system. So there are a wide range of things that can actually cause libido. But what I have found is the big part of them are related so much to our lifestyle, our emotions, and our hormones. Those are the three areas where we tend to see a lot of low libido coming up.
Now, of the both sexes, who normally prefers the sex most?
Well, I don't know if that's a medical question, but I mean, from my experience, I think that it really depends on different factors. But usually you find that the desire to have sex is usually higher in male than female. And that's sort of sometimes normal, but sometimes you can find that the other partner may feel pressurized to, try and keep up with the libido of their other partner.
Okay.
And that can have emotional, psychosocial effects that can eventually then lead to people, having a low libido. By the way, a lot of low libido sometimes comes from the fact that you're not sure whether you can keep up or cope or please your other partner, and sometimes it can actually be an issue. But sexual desire can vary. Sometimes you will find that the lady will have, a higher sex drive than the man. But sometimes it seems to be like the man has more of a higher sex drive in general.
So how do you manage? Or no, like let's assume in terms of percentages, how bad is this condition? Because I believe at a certain point it ceases to be low libido and can get way out of hand into something else altogether. It can become, like a condition that really requires a lot of attention.
So in all honesty, low libido is a very, very common thing. Very, very common. Especially because it's not like a one-size-fits-all thing. It's a spectrum where the degree of libido decrease can vary. Now, in my practice, like I said, maybe because I'm a medical doctor, maybe because people are coming to see you for help, like I said, we find about 5 out of 10 people are going to be concerned about their sex drive. Now, sometimes people are not at a point where they're not able to have a sexual relation or they're having struggles with erectile dysfunction, but they are concerned that their sex drive or their urge to have sex is no longer the same way it was. And sometimes they are concerned that they're no longer able to satisfy the sexual desire of their partner. So many people are in this spectrum where they actually are not necessarily having a very serious issue, but they are struggling. And I would say it depends with age. So up to age 30, you don't see this much. But once someone passes the age of 40,
then
you start seeing this. After 50, it becomes a very significant concern. So it's important for people who are maybe listening and who are out there to understand that if you notice a decrease in your sex drive, it's time to try and do something about it, because you can do something about it.
At what point does it become an arousal disorder?
So arousal is sort of different from libido in the sense that arousal means, do I have the capacity to have the desire to have sex once I am aroused, once I have the stimuli? Okay? So there are different things that will arouse us. Now, some people will be excessively aroused by things, and that can also be a disorder, or some people will just not have the ability to be aroused. So I think it really becomes a disorder when it starts to affect the way your normal life is. Whether you become obsessed about it because, all the time you want to think about having sex, you're easily aroused, or when you're also so concerned that, I'm not able to be aroused. So when you start to see that it affects your normal health in terms of your ability to focus, or when it affects your ability to actually, when it affects your, your personal awareness that, I have an issue, that's when it becomes an issue. But as long as someone feels like, I'm not where I used to be, it's sometimes the right point to try and see maybe I should do something about it.
Now, for those who've come to you, how do you manage
this
issue?
It's a very interesting thing, because many people, when they come, they want an immediate solution to the problem. And they tend to think that, okay, what can you give me? Do you have any herb to give me? Can I take Viagra, or can I, is it safe? They want to know if Viagra is safe. They want to know what supplement do you have. Now, I think the best approach is to understand what is causing my low libido. And usually, depending on to the extent to which you have it, you want to evaluate medically. So you want to do your check, is there any hormonal imbalance? So that's one of the first things you want to check. Then you want to check, is somebody on medication? Sometimes all you have to do is change medications, because many people are on high blood pressure medications, and especially the beta blockers. Yeah, the beta block, you know, there are these medications that end with LOL, you know, bisoprolol, nebivolol. These are the beta blockers. Sometimes these are the ones that will really, you know, kill your libido. Or antidepressants, SSRIs, fluoxetine and citalopram, even birth control. So sometimes you just want to ask that is somebody on medications, and if by changing the medication or stopping it, you can actually see an improvement. And then also you want to understand, is there any underlying medical condition, diabetes, or is somebody depressed, or do they have a gut health issue? And even ladies, for example, ladies who will have some hormonal issues, maybe like fibroids or endometriosis, can also have an issue, because this is not an issue only for men. It's also so for men. So I think the first step is to just kind of make this evaluation and explain to the person that maybe there is something that we can actually identify as a cause. But then usually you want to dive into lifestyle. And the 5 things. First, somebody needs to lose weight, especially if someone has a big belly. Because what happens is when you have a big belly, the fat in your belly area produces an enzyme called aromatase, which really just messes around with your hormones and your libido. So rather than me giving you, something to boost your libido, want to cut your weight. But of course, you always can give something, and I will mention what you can do in the short term. But you want to reduce weight, and you want to get rid of the belly, and it's possible. Then you want to get people active, exercising. Sedentarism is very, one of the drivers or risk factors for low libido. In fact, exercise seems to be one of the fastest ways you can actually improve your libido. Getting enough sleep. People need to get enough sleep. And if someone is overweight, it's important to assess for something called sleep apnea, where as they sleep, they fail to breathe because fat or something blocks the airway. So it's important to check that. Then drink enough water. It's important for people to be hydrated. People underestimate the importance of water. But because blood is a liquid, and if you want your blood to flow, you need to have enough water. And then, of course, manage the stress. But the big thing for me is always diet. So the discussion is, what should I eat more of? What should I eat less of? And I'll just tell you very quickly the things people need to get off sugar and soda if you're having low libido, because sugar is going to be affecting your hormones and will also affect your blood circulation by converting into fat and abnormal cholesterols. Processed foods, especially processed meats, the sausages, the bacon, and anything processed. Refined grains. I know people don't like to talk about refined grains, but there's no other way I can help people without talking about them, because refined grains is refined wheat, bread, chapati, cake, mandazi. By the way, people need to know that most fat on the body is not because of eating fat. It's because of eating carbohydrates, which are converted into fat. And then, of course, alcohol and caffeine. If somebody has a low libido, we want to get off alcohol and caffeine, which can be energy drinks and instant coffee. Not all coffee is bad, but some can be a problem. Then there are certain foods that help with libido. I mean, the most common, which everybody should know about, is watermelon, especially for men. Watermelon has citrulline, and this is mainly also for erectile dysfunction. Citrulline is a compound that has been said to have a Viagra-like effect. And so it's also red foods have a lot of lycopene, which is very good for men's health. So tomatoes, watermelon, all these red foods are very good for the men's health. Bananas are also good. Ginger and garlic are good for libido. Nuts, almonds and cashews, avocados are good. Eggs, protein is sometimes good, and eggs have been, some of those have been shown. But then there are these interesting food groups or compounds or substances that have an amazing capacity to improve libido. And these are the ones most people like to hear about. The ones that have helped both men and women, the first is maca root. Maca is a root that probably looks like, not cassava, but it's basically a root called maca, M-A-C-A. Very popular in Asia and South America. and people should know about it. Maca root, ginseng, and ginkgo biloba. These are very good for both men and women. Now, there are also other herbs. The first is mondia, huitei, also known as mulondo. This is very, very good for libido and erectile dysfunction. Okay. There is an African bark. It's called, I think, yohimbin. And then one of the things that I like, because most people never forget this, is a herb called honey goat weed. So honey goat weed is a weed that it was discovered because when goats ate this weed, they seemed to get aroused. So if you know the foods that are good for you and what is bad for you, and then work on your lifestyle, most of the time you're going to have an improvement in your libido. But if that doesn't work, then you can, go further and understand what other things can you do. So there are certain nutrients that are very good for male health. Now for the men, zinc, selenium. Now zinc and selenium are found in pumpkin seeds, in avocado, in beans. So zinc and selenium are very, very important for male health. And then for ladies, sometimes iron. Sometimes if you have a low iron, if you're anemic, it can also affect you. Sometimes people will need to, in rare cases, I mean, I haven't seen so much of that, but in some cases you need to replace your hormones. You need to do hormonal balancing. Now this needs to be done with a doctor. You maybe need to do testosterone replacement or estrogen replacement, but that tends to be more in people who are elderly. Not elderly, but those who are sort of getting into menopause. Because once you get into menopause, you get kind of more vaginal dryness and less desire. So sometimes an estrogen replacement. So what I tell my clients is that this is something that can be managed, and usually lifestyle is where you want to start after ascertaining that there is no medical condition or medication. And once you address this, many people in a short time will see a significant improvement in their libido or an erectile function.
Now talking about the foods you have broken down and some of the plants you have also broken down that people can use, how often should it be? Because like there's this excitement of, you've seen even people run very fast to want to get the herbals of like you can get an erection as fast as possible, or this, the other. How often should somebody be able to take this kind of drugs? Because I'm sure they're curious to know. Or this kind of foods, do they become part of their regular routine? And how soon does one see results?
Okay, so because the issue of libido and sex drive and erectile function for men and also for women is one that is very sensitive. So people usually want to have quick results because it has real life impacts immediately in your bedroom, in your marital life. So what I recommend is people should combine a lifestyle approach with using some of these herbs in the short term. So because many of these herbs are very powerful, you actually need to have somebody who knows how to prepare them to guide you, because things like mulondo, sometimes you take it and the effect is so strong that it can actually affect your blood pressure, it can give you erections that are so painful. So these things can be used daily if they're in the right dosage. And I would encourage those who are familiar with these herbs to actually prepare them if they know how to, but if not, there are already available preparations that you can use. Some of them come as nutritional supplements. That's what I tend to prefer, because they are nutritional supplements that will enhance male function. And they will already have these ingredients, the lycopene, the maca, the ginseng, the honey goat weed. These can actually have an immediate impact because they will immediately increase your arousal, and they will immediately help to boost erectile function. So these products tend to be more useful for erectile dysfunction. Libido needs to be addressed in a more robust way. So my advice is, in the short term, use these, but never see these things as a long-term solution, because then it's like you're just using them as an alternative to medication. So you get a nice product that is natural, that will help boost your libido or your sex drive, and then you start working on your lifestyle. So you can use them in combination. There are so many products out there on the market, and even when you're walking on the streets, you have people selling, the mlondo on the street there. So it's sometimes not very easy to, give advice of how to prepare it, but they are very useful, and people should not be shy to use them because they can help you, but they shouldn't also see them as a long-term.
Then demystify. I've seen others use the coffee beans, and they also think they give them that energy.
So one of the things people do use is stimulants, okay? And stimulants can be anything that has caffeine. So caffeine, coffee, sometimes you can even use alcohol in the short run. So stimulants have a way in which they can stimulate your central nervous system, and they make you feel more alert and more energetic. So in smaller doses, they can enhance or stimulate your nervous system, which can kind of make you feel, improve your sex drive or improve even your erectile function. But they are not the best solution because they are actually not solving the problem, and stimulants give you a false sense of energy or a false sense of, good feeling. And so actually for me, I find that if you use them continuously, then you'll have the reverse effect. So first you will have the effect of, maybe feeling like they give you energy, but eventually they will depress your libido. So there's so much stuff out there, and people are looking for quick solutions, and they want to feel better. But I would really discourage people from using the stimulants. Some people are even using drugs and things. These actually have a long-term negative effect.
Okay. Okay, at this particular time, I'd like us to take a very short break, and when we do get back, we'll still continue with our topic of discussion, and the show is proudly sponsored by National Medical Stores.
A good school doesn't tolerate violence against children.
Because a good school equals a better life.
Raising voices.
Welcome to the Living Room Stadium. It's the FIFA World Cup. The match is about to start. Food and drink ready. There's no space left for anyone. Come on, get your lucky chair. Take your usual spot. Even the puppy has one. It's preparation time. You can feel the tension in the air. And do you have everything you need to believe?
Okay, welcome back. But there are others who've opted to going medicine or the actual doctor way and with prescription drugs to help them boost it. Talk about it.
So, depending on the cause of your sexual dysfunction, whether it's a low libido or erectile dysfunction, sometimes you can go to a doctor and they can try and improve this, because the whole point is you want to improve your libido or your erectile function. Now, when it comes to libido, it's sort of usually about trying to optimize hormones. So you will tend to find that people will check, or sometimes they'll give you like birth control or any kind of hormone. Now, for erectile dysfunction, the more popular medications tend to be those that improve the blood circulation into the penis. So the most common is Viagra. And that is, I think it's sildenafil, that's the medical term. These medications work by, relaxing your blood vessels and increasing the flow of blood. So you can actually have improvements in your libido and your erectile dysfunction, both as a man and a woman, by going to a doctor and getting some either hormonal, anxiety, or prescription medications. But these tend to be short-term solutions. And my philosophy is always, and in functional medicine, don't treat the symptom, treat the cause of the problem. So in the short term, I would say you could use these, but it's not the ideal long-term solution. In the long term, you want to understand what is driving this. And I have seen very many, especially the men, because for women sometimes you can't get away with low libido. It may be uncomfortable, but you can't get away with it. But for a man, it's sometimes much harder because if you have a low libido, then you're not even going to have an erection. You're not going to be able to start the sexual process. So it will actually be evident that there's something wrong. For a woman, you can have very low libido, low interest, but still, have a sexual encounter. So for men, they tend to want to have a solution. And what I find is if the men start to exercise more and take steps to reduce their bellies, to drink less alcohol, to work on their lifestyle, you will actually have a quick, significant improvement in your libido. So yes, medications and pharmaceutical or medical solutions are there. You can get them through your obstetrician if you're or a gynecologist if you're a lady, or maybe whether people go to a urologist. For a man, you can get solutions. But there are actually natural lifestyle solutions that you can actually take up.
And on the issue of the hormone replacement that you were talking about, I also look at it like something that is short-term. For how long, is it supposed to be? Because even the whole process of starting it now, when the body gets used to the hormone that's introduced, then you're not going for hormone replacement anymore, then what?
So you see, this is really maybe a discussion of the approach to health or the approach to wellness. Because once I discover that a client has hormonal dysfunction, maybe a low testosterone or low estrogen, or has low thyroxine, T3, T4, low thyroid hormones, the temptation is to replace them.
Yes.
Okay, because if I replace them and I give them to you, you will feel better because I have replaced what was deficient. But like you said, artificial hormonal replacement always comes with side effects, which sometimes are actually, worse than what you're trying to solve. There can be increased risk for high blood pressure, it can be increased risk for depression, for weight gain, for heart attacks, all kinds of things. That's why you have to be very careful when you do hormonal replacement, and it should always be done only by a qualified doctor who knows what they're doing. And there are many things you have to look into before you give hormonal replacement. What is someone's blood pressure? What is their mental health like? So these hormonal replacements are short-term solutions. But I think we need to start moving away from giving replacements, hormones and medications, to asking, how do I optimize hormones? Because if your hormones have been working well and now they are not, you need to understand, how do I optimize them? And it's important for people to know that it's not complicated to optimize your hormones. And it's not that if your hormones are out of balance, once you reach a certain age, it's irreversible. Most of these things are reversible. And most of them can be optimized really quickly. We just kind of have this, maybe it's a false a way of looking at life by saying, if I pass 40, my prostate is going to have an issue. If I pass 50, I'm in my menopause. And so we start to think that our hormones have to change and we have to replace them. But I once put out a tweet that men should be able to have an erection and good libido up to 70. That's what it's supposed to be. And if that's not the case, it's not that you have a disease, it's that there is a dysfunction in your hormones, or there is something affecting the normal process. And so we should actually try and fix it. And it always starts with very simple things. Stop eating certain things, eat more of certain things, get your weight into the right place, exercise, sleep more, drink more water, and the big one is manage stress. Because actually, at the end of the day, I think that the biggest driver of low libido and erectile dysfunction starts with stress. So stress starts to be the first thing that leads you into either unhealthy eating, that leads you to obesity, or that leads you into alcohol, that further worsens the problem. So it's important to say, why are my hormones imbalanced, and what is causing the hormones to be, what is causing the cause. So the cause may be insulin resistance, but the cause of the cause may be stress. So I'd really like to encourage people that if you work on the basics, you can really improve the situation. And people should not be lazy. I know sometimes this can be a mean thing to say. Some people don't want to put in the effort. Some people are looking for a quick solution. Doctor, just give me something, you know, that can help me. But, you know, that doesn't really help you long term. Yeah.
Then about those you say, okay, last time we were having a conversation and you said there's some you dealt with, there's some who get into a comfort zone and they will not even look at it like a problem and they will instead resort to drinking.
So, you know, talking about libido, when somebody struggles with libido or erectile dysfunction, it's very emotional. And it can have long-term psychosocial effects. And because it affects your manhood, if you're a man, or a lady, it affects who you really are. In order to avoid having to deal with this situation, you actually avoid it. So you just avoid the whole bedroom situation. And because that stresses you, you go and drink. So sometimes we are running away from the problem, and we actually are looking for other ways to kind of forget that we have this issue. But there are people who, like you said, are just becoming comfortable that, you know, my libido is low and, you know, I'll just live with it like that. And that is okay if you live alone. But if you're in a sexual relationship and you're having low libido, it's going to affect your partner. And that can have long-term consequences on your relationship, on your marriage, and many other things. So I think people should actually take heed and know that this is something you can deal with. And it's not very complicated. And there is no need to be embarrassed about it, because every male or female will have periods in their life when they'll have low libido. And most people will come out of it, but many struggle. And one of the things I also want to say is that it's very important to be supportive to your partner if they have low libido, because this can be have a cyclical effect where if I struggle to have an erection or I struggle to have libido and I'm going to be embarrassed about it, I'll be very anxious every time I'm trying to have a sexual encounter. And that anxiety in its own right will make it harder for me to be able to have an erection or to even to have a sexual relationship, which makes me more anxious, so you start a cyclical effect. So if you have a supportive partner who says it's okay, we can work through this and helps you, then you get better. And this is where I personally like to have these kinds of things like, you know, honeygoatweed or murondo or ginseng or maca, because if I can help somebody, you know, improve their sexual performance, even if it's using these kinds of aids, it helps them feel relaxed that they can actually have a sexual encounter, which then will have a positive effect on them and give them and help them overcome the anxiety. So when you are in this period of low libido, it's okay to get help. It's okay to have something to help you, to support you, and that can actually help you to feel more confident and start now a positive cycle. But that's not the end. You don't just get comfortable now in my in whatever thing I'm using. You want to then still be able to get down to the basics. And I find that, you know, dietary changes are just amazing. Yeah.
Then talk about pregnancy and breastfeeding mothers. There's also that stage when they have a lot of issues and some of them take quite time to recover and get back to normal.
Yeah, because like you said, breastfeeding, pregnancy, a lot of hormonal changes. And so there'll be very low libido I don't want to say there'll be low libido, but there'll be a lower desire to have sex. Because at those times, sometimes your body is recovering if you've just had a baby. And so sometimes, you know, the decrease in sex drive is sometimes to allow your body to heal, because sex can result in a pregnancy, and sometimes your body wants to first recover from that. So when someone is breastfeeding, usually they won't have the same level of sex drive, I don't want to say libido, as when they are not breastfeeding, when they are pregnant as well. So these are situations where the sex drive will change normally. And this is a time where men have to be understanding, because sometimes this is where issues start to come in, because I have seen couples where the husband doesn't believe that the wife has a real issue. And for the men listening, I can tell you that ladies actually do struggle with low sex drive and low libido, to the point that even just a man touching you can be a turn-off. And it is, it's not that they don't want to have sex. It's that they actually are having changes in their body that are preventing them from wanting to have a sexual encounter. So these things are not always that someone doesn't want to have sex, because men always believe that, ladies just don't want to have sex, or they're depriving me. So when women are going through certain moments in their life, whether it's a period or a pregnancy or breastfeeding, or if in a stressful situation, they will have changes in their sexuality, which I would not necessarily want to call a low libido, because low libido is like you're actually not able, you have no desire, because you want to, but you're not able to. But in these circumstances, it's more like, it's not that they don't want to, but their body is not in the right place for it. Yeah.
Then how should the ladies deal with that? Because certain times it's like a push-up for the men, and the men will get a plan B.
Well, I think this is something where you need to understand your partner. It's not, when you have a lower sexual urge, it doesn't mean that you cannot have sex, or that if you have sex, something will happen to you. So sometimes you can actually take part in a sexual encounter even when you don't necessarily have a great drive for it. And so I think this is where it's important to have a good communication with your partner. Sometimes I do also accept that sometimes some partners take advantage of their sexuality, and so, I'm breastfeeding, or I'm pregnant. And by the way, pregnancy is not a contraindication for sex. You can actually have sex all the way from conception up to delivery without having any major issue. So it's just important that we don't deprive the men from sex because of these kinds of things, because like you said, it can lead to other issues. But men should also try and understand that in those moments, the desire for sex may not necessarily be the same as it was when they're normal. So there has to be that balance between the both parties. Then
what's your comment for those who are aging? Because you see, some of them you'll say, like you said, you have other solutions and this that they can use. But there are certain times, some people might get bored and tired with some of these things. You imagine somebody having to take Molondo constantly, And then there are times some will resort to saying, okay, like maybe, let me go for somebody who is younger. It will make me really feel like, if I'm a man and I go for a lady who is younger, then maybe I'll be able to prove that I'm man enough and I'm not aging. How do they deal with that?
So, sex drive has two major factors. One is the physical aspect, that my hormones work well, my desire works well, I'm able to have sex. The second is the emotional part. There's a lot of emotions that go into a sexual encounter, and that depends on, your relationship with someone, what people call foreplay. Is there arousal, attraction? So sometimes this boredom, it has nothing to do with, physical inability to have sex or low libido. It's just boredom, like you said, because maybe you're aging, maybe the relationship has sort of growing, stale. But of course, as you grow older, you have less hormones, so less sex drive. And a younger person may actually help you to renew your youth. But I think that if you understand this, you can actually take steps to keep your relationship exciting, to keep yourself in a state where you enjoy your sexual encounters, and so that you don't grow into this period where you have less desire. Because naturally, when you're younger, the sex drive is so much higher than when you're older. But that doesn't mean that when you're old, you won't have a sex drive. Now, sometimes, especially for the ladies, Once you pass menopause, it's going to be a totally different story. And so you may actually need hormonal replacement. And that's because your body is no longer able to generate the hormones necessary, especially if it starts to affect your vaginal tract. You know, there's dryness, there's soreness, there is discomfort. All those factors tend to be an issue. But regarding boredom and, you know, loss of interest, I think it's about people keeping their relationships exciting and, you know, finding the things that increase arousal. Because arousal is the first step to a sexual encounter. You know, you see something, there's some stimulus, you know. If it's a young guy and he takes off his shirt and, you know, you see his physique, then that may stimulate you compared to your husband who is, you know, but also vice versa. So sometimes you need to find those extra things, you know, improve the mood in the bedroom, you know, take your spouse out. You know, there are different things you can do. Because ultimately, you know, this discussion is about libido and sexual dysfunction, but it does have real impacts on life. And by working on the arousal part of it, and by understanding, you know, things like, you know, some people use essential oils and aromatherapy. As you grow older, you have to realize I have to put in energy and effort to keep the sexual relationship exciting. Otherwise, soon you reach a point where it's so dull and boring. And for one, it may happen only for one partner and the other one it hasn't happened for them, and then there are problems. So it's always important to distinguish between, is it low libido or loss of interest? You know, because sometimes it's not low libido, it's just not interested. And so it's different. Low libido is somebody just has no desire, okay? Even he looks at his wife or his partner and there's just no desire. But loss of interest means like I could have a desire if I want to, but, you know, I would rather, you know, go watch football or something like that.
Doctor, I'd like you to just use one sentence to crown it up on this topic of discussion.
So I would say that sex is very important for life. It's a big part of our lives. That's how children are coming into the world. It's part of our marriages and relationships. So it's very important for people to have a good sexual, vibrant life. It's important for people to realize that you can have good sexuality from your youth into your elderly ages, but it's also important to realize that many people are struggling with low libido and erectile dysfunction, and that these things can be addressed. It's important to understand that there may be things like medications, like health conditions, like emotional, psychosocial issues that are affecting your your libido and your sexual life. And you need to understand what these are, get them addressed and fix them. And lastly, it's very important to take care of your health. Somebody who keeps his weight great, who exercises, who sleeps well, who drinks water, is always going to have a great state of health. And most importantly, do not be shy to seek help. If you have an issue, reach out, go to a doctor. There is help out there. There are many things to help improve sexuality. Don't be shy to reach out and say, can I have something to improve my sexuality? Because it could be the thing that really changes your life. Yeah.
Okay, Doctor, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure the person watching out there, you've been able to learn a tip or two, a lot actually, as far as this topic of discussion is concerned. We'll catch you next week, same time, as we get down to discuss with you on another sensitive or another interesting topic on New Health Chat. And of course, not forgetting that we're in the month of November, which is the month of prostate cancer. So we'll definitely tackle and have a topic of discussion in that line as we go down the weeks before the month of November elapses. That is all we had for you tonight. It's a good night from me and Dr. Kasenene. And keep watching UBC, for the 10 o'clock news is coming your way shortly with Edward Rukidich Janangoma. Good night.